Welcome back. Allowing transgender individuals to serve in the military is an issue that has gained national attention in recent years. Just last year, President Obama announced his administration would allow transgender people to serve their country openly. It came amid a debate on Capitol Hill over whether the Pentagon should pay for medical treatment related to gender transition. Perhaps the most visible example of this was Army Private Chelsea Manning. She was convicted in July of 2013 for violating the Espionage Act. An outspoken advocate for transgender rights, she went on a hunger strike during her incarceration to demand gender confirmation treatment, and the Army complied. According to the National Center for Transgender Equality, there are more than 134,000 American transgender veterans and at least 15,000 transgender people actively serving in the military. So what does today's announcement mean for those service members? Joining us for more is Nathan Bremer, a member of the advisory board for Trans Action Florida, Gina Duncan, director of Transgender Equality for Equality Florida, and Rod Thompson, president of the Sarasota Republican Club and founder of the RevolutionaryAct.com. Thank you all for being with us. And what I want to do is just go down and get everyone's first initial reaction to the tweets that came out from the president this morning.
I was surprised. It was a bit shocking. I mean, we've heard announcements of policy over Twitter from the president before, but this is a significant shift, especially in light of recent legislation moving forward in the last few days, voted on positively by Republicans supporting transgender troops. It's a strong 180.
All right, Gina?
Same in the fact that not only was it surprising and alarming, but the delivery was certainly interesting in the fact that, you know, this is the way we govern now. This is the way we learn policy now, is through tweets. We saw the administration already having to circle back and start wordsmithing what's going on and coming together in reference to what the official position is for the administration. So it not only was a heinous announcement, but it was also very ill delivered.
Okay, and Rod, your reaction?
Well, I disagree on the quality of the announcement. I agree with the policy, but this is another classic case of Trump doing the right thing the wrong way. He does this on a consistent basis. He was doing everything fine. He had Mattis, he had the whole team investigating it, looking into it, seeing if this was something they wanted to do, if they wanted to adjust it or whatever. Mattis has definitely been emphasizing getting back to making it a war-fighting machine and all. Then Mattis is on vacation, and in the morning he tweets out a whole change in policy. It's like, oh, come on. It's very frustrating to watch. Well, obviously, we'll discuss the merits of the policy as the show goes on.
Right.
But my reaction is like, yeah, I didn't see it coming, but should have.
And why do you think he's choosing this route? Is this being supported by maybe some of his staff members, or do you think they're feeling the way you're feeling and saying, why are you putting these tweets out right now?
Gosh, it's really hard to get in the president's head. But I don't know for sure, because during the campaign, he was actually very transgender friendly. And he, you know, I mean, he slammed the North Carolina bathroom law, and I disagreed with him on that. But he was that. But I think Mattis and maybe a lot of the others were having some influence on him. What triggered him this morning, I don't know. To do it, but it looked like he was probably going to be trending this way all along. I don't think it's from his family, because his family is socially liberal as a rule, so I doubt that it's family-wise.
I was going to ask you about that. Of course, we'll get more into, like you said, the merits of it. But I do want to ask you that on the campaign trail, he was very adamant about supporting the LGBT community. So then you get this announcement, and I think a lot of people in the community are thinking, what is going on?
Right, and that would be reasonable enough. But this is maybe one of the few respects in which Donald Trump acts like a normal politician. He says one thing on the campaign trail and then does something different in office.
Right, okay. And we have real quick, just 30 seconds left, but Nathan, did you expect something like this after President Trump on the campaign trail had been supportive?
I think there was some indication that, yes, we could see policies coming back, and we've consistently seen policies rolled back. I'm surprised for this policy because other folks that have been advising him have let him know that this policy that's in place is good. We just need to get the details hammered out. That was supposed to be the next step.
Okay, we are just getting started with this conversation. We'll pick right back up after a check on our forecast. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we're discussing President Trump's announcement this morning saying the U.S. government will not accept or allow transgender individuals to serve in any capacity in the U.S. military. Our guests tonight are Nathan Bremer of the Trans Action Florida Advisory Board, Gina Duncan, Director of Transgender Equality for Equality Florida, and Rod Thompson, President of the Sarasota Republican Club. Now, Gina, I want to ask you what you think is detrimental about this policy.
Well, let's look at the facts. Currently, there's estimated over 15,000 transgender people serving in the military. Young people, service members who are protecting our country, who are risking their lives every day to protect our freedoms, and yet they're being affected by this heinous policy that's come out. And how will that affect the status of our military? The numbers? How will it affect their discharge situation? How will it affect their future benefits, their insurance, their pensions, things like that? A lot of loopholes, a lot of issues that do negatively affect the transgender community.
And Nathan, what would you say to people who say, okay, we don't want to discriminate, but also this could be an awkward situation. Some people aren't versed in how to deal with those who have gender identity issues, or maybe they are in locker rooms and they don't know how to react. Is it something that you would say just act normal, or how would you kind of explain that to someone who is feeling like maybe they support this policy because they feel strange in these situations?
Well, I think each organization or each culture, so in this case the military, has to approach their training of their troops in a very unique way. So that training may go a little differently. What we do know is that the military has already invested a lot of time and energy and created policies and procedures for how to enact the policy. It's already been in place for a year, as you mentioned, and they were just drilling down to the details to finalize. It got pushed back for 6 months. The bigger issue is that we've allowed members to serve openly for a year. You've had a lot of folks who are strong advocates partner with their commanding officers, be public, and now wake up this morning to their commander-in-chief completely invalidating their existence and their service. And that's amazingly disrespectful and amazingly harmful. I mean, we have always had transgender members in the military, as we always had lesbian and gay members, but it's about serving openly. So to do this in this fashion is a slap in the face to those folks who, as Gina mentioned, have been putting their lives on the line. There are folks right now, people that I know that are serving overseas right now, openly transgender, doing their job. They trained, they passed their certifications, they are defending liberty and democracy, and they woke up this morning to news like that is it's just devastating. And they went out and patrolled and did their job for us in spite of it.
And Rod, what are you hearing on the other end of the spectrum, maybe from supporters, but also active military and veterans who are in support of this?
Right, so I would take the approach a little bit not from the transgender community's point of view, but from the military point of view. And from the military point of view, the purpose of the U.S. military is to destroy the enemy's capabilities to wage war against us. That's the sole purpose. That's why we have a U.S. military. And it's not really supposed to be a petri dish for social justice experimentation. I think President Obama made it that in a number of ways, and certainly in the last year of his administration, he took it further. I think that's a mistake. I think that can undermine the ability of the Air Force or the military to do that. Specifically, I know of a guy who was injured in Iraq, lost his arm, and he explained how he was in a 12-man fire base out in the middle of nowhere, about an hour's drive, probably crummy roads from anybody. They got food every 8 days. They went out on their patrols every day. He said it was an incredibly stressful situation. They had tracers at night. They had IEDs on their patrols. And the younger guys and those that weren't mentally tough and stable and emotionally strong were snapping all the time, and they had to periodically rotate them out. His point from his experience would be if you put somebody that's transgender in there, which to some degree, and they may disagree with this, on the face of it suggests somebody that's mentally and emotionally confused at the moment, if they're transgendering, if they're looking at that, if they're not sure that who they are, putting them in that super high stress situation clearly undermines the effectiveness of that unit, and so he would be very much opposed to it.
You know, and studies show that that's absolutely false. And the fact that the Department of Defense did a study last year that showed that units that did have transgender members in them did not experience any of those negative effects. It's also known that no one is more driven and focused than a transgender person. You think of going through transitioning from one gender to another. You have to be very focused and really want to be your true and authentic selves. And we've seen that transgender people serving in the military are some of the best and the brightest in the military.
Can I ask a quick question of Gina or Nathan? Specifically, I think when Nathan said serving openly as a transgender in the military, like in Iraq, I'm not really actually clear what that means when you say serving openly.
Like everyone in your unit
It's just that
knows,
people know
correct?
that you're trans.
Yeah.
It's just that,
Yes.
right? There's no other differences in their actions. They're just aware
It's
that
out
they're
there.
transgender
Yes.
because they've said it.
Because it's important to note that no two persons' transgender journey is the same.
Right.
Some people want surgery, some don't. Some come out at an earlier age or a later age. So it's just that the military actually should reflect the diversity within our culture and our society. And so there should be no reason that transgender people are not able to serve.
Let's circle back, though, to this particular statement. This statement was discrimination on its face, period. And all the arguments we're hearing about readiness, we heard it before we had desegregation, we heard it before women were allowed to serve openly, and we heard it before lesbian and gays were allowed to be served openly. So none of the statistics, none of the research supports that there's an issue. In fact, if you talk to people on the field that are serving with transgender troops and you talk to their commanding officers, they'll give you a very different story.
And I do want to point out, Rod, that several Republicans have come out in opposition to this, including just recently, I saw on Twitter just before the show started, Joni Ernst, who is a female veteran Republican, and she says she is against this policy. She doesn't agree with using taxpayer money for gender reassignment surgery, but she agrees that transgender people should be able to serve in the military. What is your response to many of these people in the GOP against this?
Right. The Republican Party is actually, in my opinion, is a party of more diverse ideas than the Democrat Party. We're not quite as monolithic in our thinking. However, I would say that still those numbers, that last vote that was referenced earlier, it was only like 20-some that crossed over. It's still, by and large, most all Republicans oppose it. There was the Congresswoman from Miami. It was a Republican. I'm sorry, I can't say her name right now, but we all know it. She has a son who's transgender. So she clearly has personal experience. It's clearly going to affect her opinion. That makes total sense to me. And so you can see that happening. But in my discussions with Republicans and conservatives, there's almost uniform support for this policy and severe opposition to what President Obama did 7 years into his administration.
Okay, so but we have a minute left, and I just want you all to give us an opportunity to talk about a little bit about how you think people can be more comfortable with accepting this type of policy. Let's just say before, I think that's a lot of it. I think a lot of people are saying we're just not comfortable. How do we get comfortable with it?
And I think he actually sort of went in the direction that I would sort of encourage, that you may not know a transgender individual. And so as the Congresswoman in Miami has a family member, there are a lot of folks that are thinking about this policy sort of outside looking in without, one, understanding a military culture, and two, without really knowing a transgender individual. And what we have to realize and recognize that transgender Americans are living their life as we all are, members of our family, our co-workers, and trying to live out the American dream, which for some means serving their country because they are patriots, and they should have the right to do that.
We have an adage within Equality Florida that goes, we believe in being visible. Visibility will lead to awareness. Awareness will lead to education, and education will lead to equality and normalcy. People do fear what they don't understand. And once people are educated and know transgender people, this situation, this issue goes away very quickly.
Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we will have final thoughts from our guests. Plus, what some of our viewers are saying about last night's topic, that was the worst mosquito season to hit the Suncoast in years. We'll be right back. Welcome back. President Trump's announcement about transgender people serving our military even caught the Pentagon off guard. So when could we see a policy go into effect, if ever, and what kind of backlash would that face? Our guests are joining us for their final thoughts. And Rod, I do want to start with you kind of answering that question. Do you think that this will actually become a policy? What's the likelihood that we will see this actually go from tweet to true enactment?
I would say it's likely. I would say it's certainly more likely than not because, the president's usually looking for a win. And since he came out strongly with it today, and there was a lot of backlash, I'm not sure that he's going to be quick to back down. One thing the president does is he punches back. And I don't like the way he does it all the time, but he does that consistently. So I would actually give it pretty good odds of being enacted. And I'd also like to say that I understand the argument that it's discrimination, but we actually discriminate in the military in a number of ways. I mean, if you have ADHD, if you have mood swings, I think in the setup for it, asthma, I think that is a disqualifier. If these things you develop once you're in the military, then it's taken care of. But a lot of these things, last I knew, being nearsighted and flat-footed, there's a lot of ways we discriminate because we have a specific purpose for the military.
And I am glad you brought that up, because that was in the story about asthma, and I thought, you know what, that could be one of the conditions that would exclude you, depending on your, severity and treatment. But that's another issue. Okay, so Gina, if this were to be enacted, how do you think people in the community that you serve would react, and what will their main concerns be?
Well, there's a lot of concerns already. There's a lot of fear in the community. We were led down the road somewhat with the Trump administration that they would be somewhat supportive of the LGBTQ community. We're not seeing that. And we see, a situation of where does this end? Does it stop with the transgender community? Who is next? Who is next for them to come for? Will they then attack, gay people in the military? Will it then be Muslims in the military for the same reasons that Muslims serving in the military could be a distraction, could affect morale, things like that? So we're concerned of the long-term effects of this. We know that we're definitely under fire at this point. We're concerned. We hope that the community and the nation rises up and pushes back against this, as they have against the healthcare propositions.
And Nathan, just to close out this segment, you have a unique perspective as a veteran yourself.
I do. I think there are two things that are going on here. One, there's a policy. It's a bad policy. It's discrimination. But I think the second piece to that is the way he went about delivering this message, because the consistent message from the White House has been, we don't have your back and we don't support you. Policy after policy has been backpedaled. I worry about that for the LGBT youth. I worry about that for folks who want to serve, who may go through, and be gay or transgender and end up transitioning later on. It's the openly serving that has already been shown to be effective. Those folks that are in those jobs, as he mentioned, are qualified and trained and ready to serve their country. And that's who we need to be talking about, and they're serving right now, today, around the world.
All right, well, thank you for sharing your thoughts. And before we go, we want to share what some of our viewers thought about last night's topic, the mosquito season on the Suncoast. According to mosquito management officials, the drought conditions over the winter, combined with steady summer rains, have created ideal conditions for mosquitoes to breed. This season is just getting started, but luckily we've only had 6 locally transmitted cases of Zika virus, compared to 285 cases last year. So we asked you what you think about the mosquitoes returning. Mary Beth Waltz writes, I've lived here for 20 years. Last year was the first time we had a problem with mosquitoes at our house. It looks like this year will be the same, if not worse. John Carpenter writes, I think that mosquito patrol within our government structure should be out spraying to combat this issue. So what do you think about transgender individuals serving in our military? You can join tonight's conversation by visiting our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. You can watch this discussion that we had here tonight or any past discussions on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. So thanks to all of our guests for being here tonight. Nathan Bremer is on the advisory board for Trans Action Florida. Gina Duncan is director of Transgender Equality for Equality Florida. And Rod Thompson is president of the Sarasota Republican Club and founder of the RevolutionaryAct.com.